A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media. Bringing you another book review today, but this review is going to be in a little bit of a different style. Now, a lot of you know that I am a fan of Star Wars. I've talked about Star Wars on the channel quite a bit. Prequel trilogy, heck, even the new trilogy. The TV shows that are out are just amazing. Kenobi just started, and that one is just phenomenal. So I've been going back and purchasing a lot of the old Star Wars novels from the extended universe before Disney brought up the Lucasfilm and basically shit on everything in the extended universe stuff is no longer canon, which is a shame, but there you go. Excuse me. And the first book I'm going to look at is Tales from Jabba's Palace. Now, this is one of, I believe, 5 books of Star Wars short stories. There is Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, Tales from the Empire, Tales from the New Republic, Tales of the Bounty Hunters, and this one. It's often very hard when you get a collection of short stories that are written by different authors. Some of them are going to be of lesser quality. Some of them are going to just be boring. Maybe you're not a fan of a certain author's writing style. There are a lot of stories in this book, and while I did read this when it first came out back in the day, this one was chosen by Ian Van Gamet for me to read. He is a fan of this book. He actually read it back when it came out. And the reason he wanted me to read it was because he said all of the stories link directly to Return of the Jedi, the scene at the beginning of the film where we are in Jabba the Hutt's palace and Luke Skywalker comes and goes to rescue Han and Leia and Chewie and all that in the Sarlacc pit and all that good stuff. What I didn't realize, or what I had clearly forgotten, was that not only does every story in this book link in some way to that opening scene of Return of the Jedi, but the stories also link to each other. So you do get, basically, you get the story of what happened in Jabba's palace around that time, but you get it from the perspectives of many different characters, and often those characters are seen in 1 or 2 shots in the actual film itself, which is really interesting to me. So this doesn't feel like a collection of short stories so much as if you're familiar with, for example, the Game of Thrones novels, where every chapter has a dominant character that we are getting the story from that character's perspective. That's what this book feels like. I'm not going to say it's Star Wars Game of Thrones. That would be sacrilegious to Star Wars fans and Game of Thrones fans. There are, how many stories in here? Let's just see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 stories and an epilogue at the end, which is quite a lot for a short story collection. So I'm going to go through these one story at a time, let you know what I thought about them, and we'll just take it from there. So get ready for another episode of... So the first story is about Malakili, who is the rancor keeper in the palace. We see him primarily in the movie after the rancor is killed. He's the fat gentleman in the headdress who is sobbing. And the story itself is actually quite humorous, but you do get an idea in the movie when we see Malakili. It's a sight gag. He's crying like, and his friend is consoling him, patting him on the shoulder. But in the book, you find out that, or in the story, I should say, you find out that he basically trained dangerous animals at various galactic zoos, and Jabba wanted him to basically train and look after the rancor, which he did, and you get a whole lot of these bonding moments where he would often have his lunch in the rancor pit, sitting on the rancor's claw. He would take the rancor out to let him run around in the wild, and all of that kind of thing. And you do understand how deep a hatred that Malakili has for Jabba. All Jabba wants is a challenge for the rancor. At one point, Jabba is talking about having a krayt dragon fight the rancor, and he actually hires bounty hunters to capture a live krayt dragon. And Malakili knows that the rancor is probably going to die. So this is a humorous tale. It's a very bizarre start for the book, but you do get an understanding of the relationship that Malakili has with Jabba's chef, Porcelos, I believe his name is. And so you start to see, even from the very first story, the friendships and the webs that are woven in the characters that are outside of Jabba and his main entourage that we see in the movie. When the camera pans past and we see all of the different creatures that are in the throne room of Jabba's palace, Tales from Jabba's Palace gives you a better understanding of who is plotting against Jabba and who knows who and things like that. Now, I understand that this isn't canon anymore, and that's perfectly fine, although you're free to take it and run with it as much as you want. That is the first story, entitled A Boy and His Monster, The Rancor Keeper's Tale, by Kevin J. Anderson, who also edited the collection itself. A very fun tale, and one that makes you look at rancors in a different light as well. They're not just like the giant mindless beast. If you've actually played any of the video games or anything like that, you kind of understand what rancors are. But here, and if you've seen the Book of Boba Fett, but here you get the feeling that the rancor is more than a pet. To Malakili, it is his friend as well. The second story, Taster's Choice, The Tale of Jabba's Chef, by Barbara Hambly, actually starts with the arrival of R2-D2 and C-3PO to Jabba's palace. And the chef, Porcelos, is being told about this by Malakili from the previous story. Now, this is an interesting story because it actually starts to set up one of the main threads that runs through most of the stories in this book, and that is there is an assassin in the palace who is killing people, and nobody quite knows how or why he is doing it. At the same time, someone is poisoning Jabba the Hutt's food, especially those little frogs that he is so fond of eating in the film itself. And Porcelos is worried that he's going to be blamed if Jabba the Hutt gets sick, and Jabba is going to basically kill him, execute him, feed him to the rancor. Over the course of the story, you find out exactly how much of a prick Jabba the Hutt really is, in seeing how he treats his chef and the rest of the characters in the palace. The end of this story is hilariously bleak, in as much as there seems to be a miscommunication, and while Porcellus believes that because people who ate the food didn't get sick, the miscommunication from Hutties, thanks to C-3PO working as the protocol droid, basically Jabba believes that Porcellus is cursed and has him confined to the dungeons at the end of the story. So ultimately, everything that Porcellus feared really came to pass in a roundabout and very humorous way. The story itself is very well written. I like the friendship between Malakili and Porcellus. I think you get that really good sense of camaraderie between two people that just don't want to be in the situation that they found themselves in. And that's a very common theme through a lot of the stories in this collection. So that was the story of Jabba the Hutt's chef. One of the funny, like just off to the side, at one point, a shipment of food hasn't come to the palace, and so Porcellus tries to feed Jabba like a salad, and Jabba the Hutt just freaks the fuck out. Really well written, really funny scene. So that was the second story. The first two stories have kind of set a tone, and it's interesting because that scene in Jabba the Hutt's throne room in Return of the Jedi, there are a lot of funny-looking, weird, throwaway characters, and you never really know who they are or what they are. And then reading this book, you start to get more of an understanding. So the third story, surprisingly enough, is called That's Entertainment, The Tale of Salacious Crumb by Esther M. Friesner. I apologize if I didn't say that name correctly. Salacious Crumb, of course, being that little Clatuvian monkey, spider monkey, or whatever the thing is called. I can't remember off the top of my head. The thing that's just going like, looks like a little fucking Muppet. The story itself doesn't focus on Salacious Crumb so much as a character called Melvosh Blore. Melvosh Blore is a scholar from a university who had the idea of interviewing Jabba the Hutt, an idea that was shot down by his peers, but one of his rivals actually steals the idea and gets the funding from the university to go and interview Jabba the Hutt. And when he doesn't come back, Melvosh Blore says, I will go and do it. I have a contact in Jabba's palace. And when he gets to the palace and he meets the contact, he doesn't realize that his contact is dead and that the person he has met, who he believes is his contact, is Jabba's pet, Salacious Crumb. We actually find out in this story that Salacious Crumb is quite intelligent, that he can communicate, that he can speak, but all through the story, Salacious Crumb is leading Melvosh through the palace itself into hidden rooms and things, and Melvosh is talking and Salacious Crumb is listening, and Melvosh is really impressed that this contact he believes that he's meeting is so attentive and listens and things like that. Ultimately, Salacious Crumb leads him to Jabba, where he basically finds out that his rival is dead, and Jabba is like, make me laugh, because that's Jabba the Hutt's big thing through these stories. And he tells a joke to Jabba the Hutt, and Jabba the Hutt basically says, I've heard that, and hits the button, and he falls to his death in the rancor pit. I thought a story about Salacious Crumb would be boring, and it's actually quite entertaining. I don't like this idea of there being like a university where they want to interview Jabba the Hutt because he's like a socioeconomics professor or some shit like that. That whole thing doesn't fit into my idealized version of Star Wars, but that's fine. I mean, a lot of people are going to look at Attack of the Clones, and when Padme is talking about being part of like the youth senate, and there was a boy who was very handsome, and Anakin's like, don't fucking tell me that shit, bitch. That's not this idealized version of Star Wars, and that's fine. I liked getting a little bit of background on Salacious Crumb. He was pretty cool in Return of the Jedi, and knowing that his race is actually intelligent and not just like a Frank Oz hand puppet thing, I thought was pretty cool. So that to me was not a bad story, not one of the best in the collection, of course, but not a bad story by any stretch of the imagination. The next story involves Oola, the Twi'lek dancer that we see, who tragically we know how her story ends after watching the movie. She is she falls into the rancor pit and is eaten, but the short story is basically her backstory, how she gets to that point. We know that she was taken from Ryloth, which is the Twi'lek home planet. And when she gets to Tatooine, she actually does encounter Luke Skywalker very early on, as he is coming to kind of bargain for the release of the prisoners, Solo and Leia and all of that. And Luke actually offers to get her out of there, which she kind of refuses, much to her detriment. It is a really good story, very well written, and I like the fact that a character that we know very little about is now kind of humanized, and we are given a little bit more of her story, which makes her death to the Rancor all that more tragic. Okay, Let Us Pray, a Whiffhid's tale. Sorry about the camera there, I just bumped it with my foot. So this tells the story of one of the bounty hunters who accompanies Jabba on the sail barge. He is actually working as a spy for a rival crime lord called Lady Valerian, a name that pops up quite a bit in this book. And he and Lady Valerian are lovers of sorts. He discovers, however, that ultimately he survives. First of all, he survives the death of Jabba the Hutt in the sail barge and all that kind of stuff. But he discovers that Lady Valerian has taken a bounty out on his head as he tries to leave Tatooine. He actually manages to get his hands on the thermal detonator that Leia brings to the palace in Return of the Jedi, which is kind of interesting. It's not a bad story about this guy who's kind of double-dealing Jabba the Hutt and what he hopes to gain out of it and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty entertaining, but one of the weaker stories in the collection, as you don't really care all that much about this character because, and only because, he's so very quickly shown in Return of the Jedi, and you really want to get to the stories about the characters that are much more prominent. The next story is written by Timothy Zahn, who you might know as being the first author to really push the extended universe with his Heir to the Empire trilogy. His story is about Mara Jade. Mara Jade is the Emperor's hand. She is a Force-using assassin for Emperor Palpatine. And in this story, she has been sent to Jabba the Hutt's palace in order to intercept and kill Luke Skywalker. Now, if you're familiar with the extended universe, Mara Jade ultimately goes on to become Luke Skywalker's wife. They have a child together, which they name Ben, after Obi-Wan Kenobi. And she is ultimately killed by one of the children of Han and Leia in the Legacy of the Force 9-book series, which is something that I'll get into much, much later. It's a great story. Timothy Zahn is a fantastic author, and this is really, you kind of get the sense that this is the first time Mara Jade has actually failed in doing anything the Emperor has asked her to do. We get a good sense of who is in and around the palace, like Jabba the Hutt's palace in this book, in this story, I should say, and we get a great sense of the abilities of Mara Jade to be able to kind of deal with threats as they come up. All in all, if you've never read anything about Mara Jade, it is a fantastic introduction to the character and a really great addition to this anthology. The next story, and then there was some, the Gamorrean Guard's Tale, is... oh, wow. How do I even begin with this one? The Gamorrean Guards in Return of the Jedi were those green-skinned, pig-faced creatures that they had the axes and they were dressed kind of like barbarians, almost resembling traditional fantasy orcs. You do see them in the Book of Boba Fett, which I really appreciated. I thought that was a really cool addition to that TV show. But, and sorry, you do see one of them die when he falls into the rancor pit with Luke in Return of the Jedi. Now, this story is about a Gamorrean guard called Gartog. Gartog is not the smartest Gamorrean guard out there, which is actually really interesting to me because in the film, they're not portrayed as particularly intelligent beings. However, in the story, you do see that their intelligence levels kind of vary, and Gartog is way down here. He is... he's the Gamorrean Guard equivalent of Donald Trump, let's just say. Let's get a little political here. He is the Donald Trump of Gamorrean Guards. Now, Gartog, in this story, his whole thing is he wants to ride on the skiff as Jabba takes, the sail barge, as Jabba takes the prisoners out to be eaten by the Sarlacc pit. That is his wish. The other Gamorrean Guards, however, think Gartog is just too much of a fuck-up to let him do that. But there are people... Let me just adjust the camera. I can see that it is a little crooked. Yeah, good enough. But there are people in Jabba's palace that are dying mysteriously. It's a conspiracy, which we have seen in the other stories, of course. And Gartog believes that if he can solve this murder conspiracy, then he should be allowed to ride on Jabba's sail barge out to the pit of Carkoon, the Sarlacc. The problem being, Gartog is fucking dumb. Like the dumbest of the fucking dumb. I honestly believe it would make a fantastic television show, a Star Wars comedy following Gartog the Gamorrean Guard. Because what ultimately ends up happening is that he sees all the dead bodies of these people. Sorry, I keep bumping the fucking camera today. Whatever, who gives a shit? He sees all of these dead bodies as clues to who the murderer is, and he starts carrying them around. And he carries them on his shoulders, and as he carries them around, they start to fucking decay, and, like the eyeballs drip from the sockets and all that kind of stuff. And everyone is like, what the fuck are you doing? And he has no fucking notion. And then ultimately, at the end of this story, he doesn't get to go on the sail barge, and he just sits there with his 2 dead bodies talking to them as if they're his friends. I thought the story was fucking stupid as shit when I first read it. In hindsight, and going over it now, it's actually very clever. I love the character of Gartog now. I wish there was more of him in the future. And this was just a very funny, very well-written comedic story of a character who the race of the Gamorrean guards are kind of throwaway in the Star Wars universe. They're seen as like stupid barbarian types. And in this story, you find out that they're actually a little more than that. And I really appreciate that. So that was pretty cool. So, old friends, Ifant Mon's tale is interesting in that it is the first story in this collection that's written in the first person. Ifant Mon is a Shevin who is working security for Jabba the Hutt. He's the head of Jabba the Hutt's security. Jabba the Hutt actually rescued him, so he kind of feels like he has a debt to pay to Jabba. And through the course of the story, you find out that he is actually really not a bad guy. I mean, in Return of the Jedi, we get the idea that everyone that's in Jabba's palace are bad guys. They're, they're bounty hunters and all this kind of stuff. And he legitimately feels loyalty to Jabba the Hutt. And what ultimately happens is that he ends up talking with Luke Skywalker after Luke is captured following the death of the Rancor. And Luke senses something in Ifant Mon, which he basically tells him, listen, you need to go to Jabba and you need to explain things. And Ifant Mon believes Luke. There is like a force connection, if you can kind of believe that. And Ifant Mon basically goes to Jabba and says, listen, don't get on this sail barge. Don't do this. This is a huge mistake. And Jabba, being Jabba, is like, or however Hutts talk. I don't know. I don't fucking speak Huttese, okay? It's a fucking made-up language, so fuck you for making fun of me for doing that. But Ifant Mon doesn't get on the sail barge, and ultimately, this is almost a redemption story. It feels like, but you get the sense that even though Jabba the Hutt does things for himself, there are still people around him that feel this bonding, this sense of camaraderie and friendship and loyalty to him, because it seems like there are times when Jabba himself has done things for others as opposed to for himself. So this, while giving us an exploration of the character of Ifant Mon, you're also getting another side of Jabba the Hutt that we don't really get in Return of the Jedi, and to a lesser extent, the special edition version of Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. So that was pretty cool, I thought. Goatgrass, the tale of Reyes. Reyes, of course, being the three-eyed Gran male that you see kind of cheering on when Luke is dropped into the Rancor pit, is pretty lackluster. I mean, his whole thing is he's plotting against Jabba. He is in cahoots with some of the other people who are plotting against Jabba the Hutt. He's drunk, and his whole role is to simply look after Jabba the Hutt's pet, like frog dog Bubo. The thing you see at the beginning of when in Return of the Jedi when it pans across, and there's that thing that's tongue goes out and like eats the fucking little rat thing outside of Jabba's palace. Reyes is a pretty pathetic character. He is brought up quite a lot in the other stories, but ultimately his story is just nothing, to be perfectly honest with you. It was really fucking boring, and I didn't enjoy it. And then he dies at the end on the sail barge. Nothing more to say. The author, however, Deborah Wheeler, fantastic writing style, but in this anthology she was given a lackluster character to work with, no fault of her own. A pretty bad fucking story all around. And the band played on. The band's tale. Yes, there is a tale of Cy Snootles and the Max Rebo band. And if you have no idea who that is, then you weren't raised on the original Return of the Jedi and not that shockingly awful fucking band sequence that was shoved into the special edition because George Lucas has decided that, oh, you know what? I'm going to be a fucking cunt and get rid of the Cy Snootles and the Max Rebo band segment from the original Return of the Jedi, as well as the Ewok song at the end of Return of the Jedi. Yes, George Lucas, you are not forgiven for getting rid of the Yub Nub song. Go fuck yourself. That's all I have to say about that. Cy Snootles and the Max Rebo band, I loved as a fucking kid. I thought they were fucking hilarious. And this story is just phenomenal. It basically plots how they come to Tatooine. The band itself has a contract to play at the Mos Eisley Cantina, which we know from Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. The Bith band is playing at that cantina, and the Bith band kind of intercept them and take out their manager. They're going to kill them as well, but they manage Cy Snootles, Max Rebo, and Droopy McCool. Yes, that is his actual name. Managed to get away, and it's how they end up playing in Jabba's palace. Cy Snootles, who is the chick with the big lips. Max Rebo is the blue elephant dude. And Cy decides that we will make Max the face of the band, and all contracts will go through him. And then when they meet Jabba, Jabba's contract is you get food to play, and Max, being the creature that he is like, hey, that's fine, that's great. We will work for food. And the band members are all kind of fucked up. And by the end of the story, they're playing on the sail barge. They manage to escape the destruction, and they kind of all go their separate ways. And it is a funny, heartfelt story about throwaway characters that George Lucas didn't even have the heart to keep in the special edition in any major role, unlike the role that they were given in the original Return of the Jedi. I absolutely love this story. It was hilarious and just really, really great, especially because most of it comes from the perspective of Max Rebo, the blue elephant keyboard player, and his mindset is just so fucking funny that he will literally work for food. He doesn't care about money. He will, like, in his alien race, working for food is the epitome of success, which just struck a chord in me, and I really, really enjoyed this story. Of the day's annoyances is the story about Bib Fortuna. Bib Fortuna being the Twi'lek major domo to Jabba the Hutt. You find out how he got that position by backstabbing his friend. You find out that Bib Fortuna is actually working to take over Jabba's crime syndicate. And you find out that Bib Fortuna himself has been working with the monks, who you kind of see a brain in a jar on spider legs in Return of the Jedi. So the whole idea is Jabba's palace used to be a monastery, and these monks who inhabited the monastery now live underneath it, and their whole thing is that their rise to enlightenment is that they have their brains removed and put into fluid jars, and that way the earthly realm, so to speak, no longer becomes a distraction to them, and they can spend their time pondering the universe. They're still alive, but they're just brains in jars. You find out that Bib Fortuna sold out his own people on Ryloth and managed to escape with this Twi'lek called Nat, who was badly burned in the attack on Ryloth, and Bib Fortuna manages to get him, and they end up somehow in Jabba's palace. Jabba thinks the burned Twi'lek, who doesn't have his leku, which are the tentacles from the Twi'lek's head, because they've been burnt. Jabba thinks he's a hideous freak, and Bib Fortuna is trying to keep Nat alive because he believes that he can bring Nat back to Ryloth and use him as a martyr to reunite all of the Twi'leks, and then he will be the voice behind the throne, so to speak. At the same time, in Jabba's palace, Bib Fortuna has been communicating with the monks and learning how to harness almost Force-like powers, but they're not really described that way. Jabba wants to kill Nat, wants to feed him to the Rancor. Bib Fortuna manages to save him by basically having his brain removed by the monks and put in a jar. And he promises Nat, listen, I will make sure a body is cloned for you and we can put your brain back in the body. At the same time, all of the stuff with Luke and Han and going to the Sarlacc pit kind of happens. Jabba is killed, of course, if you've seen Return of the Jedi. Spoiler alert, Jabba's killed. And Bib Fortuna gets back to the palace and ultimately discovers that he has nothing left. And the monks who he has been talking to decide that the best thing for him is enlightenment. And a really dark ending to this fucking story, which made me feel a little sick, actually, is Bib Fortuna waiting while the surgical droids come and they are going to remove his brain and put it in a jar. Now, we know from the book of Boba Fett that Boba Fett actually defeats Bib Fortuna to take over the palace. Remember, this is the extended universe, which is not canon, but that is a really fucking dark way to end Bib Fortuna's actual story. And it, like that kind of thing, I'm not a fan of body horror like that. And that just smacked of body horror wrapped up in a Star Wars story. Props to the author, M. Shane Bell, for taking that route, but yeah, it was dark. It was fucking dark. The Great God Quay, which is the tale of Barada and the Weequays, is actually pretty interesting. Barada, of course, is the character who fixes all of the vehicles in Jabba's palace. and the Weequays are the bodyguards, so to speak. You do see them in Return of the Jedi. They're the Klingon-looking guys with the headdress at the back. And this is mainly a story where you find out about Weequay culture, in as much as they believe in a single god who they communicate with through this device, which is very much like a magic 8-ball, where you would shake it, you would ask it a question, and you would shake it up, and it says, like, all signs point to yes. The Weequays, in this instance, are looking for a bomb they believe has been planted on Jabba's sail barge. And so they kind of go about looking for this device. You do find out that in Weequay culture, whenever there is a problem, they have a panel meeting, and one of them, there's all elections, who's going to be the president of this kind of panel, and so on and so forth. And you find out that Weequays don't have singular names. They just all refer to themselves as the same thing. It's a fun story. It's a stupid story. And I actually believe, in my personal opinion, it is detrimental to the Weequays that we see in the film Return of the Jedi, in as much as it makes them look fucking stupid, when in that film they actually look pretty badass. So it wasn't a bad story, but ultimately it wasn't a good story either. In the next story, A Bad Feeling, the tale of EV9D9, who, for those of you that don't know who EV9D9 is the droid in Return of the Jedi when C-3PO and R2-D2 are first brought to Jabba's palace. EV9D9 is the droid that is torturing the other droid by lowering the heating things to the droid's feet, and that droid kind of screams out. This story was fucking amazing. And it was amazing for one reason. It's because it gave the character of EV9D9 a backstory that tied in with Lando Calrissian and his time as the administrator on Cloud City. You find out that EV9D9, or in the story 9D9, was the security droid on Cloud City, and you find out that after the events of Empire Strikes Back, the security droid orchestrated a scheme to flee the city without anyone noticing by destroying some of the engines that held Cloud City aloft. And 99 ultimately finds herself, the droid identifies as a woman, finds herself at Jabba's palace, where they have full reign to capture and torture droids and other living creatures, but primarily droids. Lando Calrissian, of course, comes to Jabba's palace to rescue Han and Leia. You see Lando in Return of the Jedi with his kind of bone mask, and 9D9 believes that he has come for her, when in actual fact that is not the case. It is another droid that has come to enact revenge on 9D9 for what they did, or she did, on Cloud City. This is a great story because it gives the reader the sense that even though droids in the Star Wars universe are primarily just robots, throughout the the movies, the TV shows, all that kind of stuff, you do get the feeling that droids have emotions and that maybe or maybe not they can feel pain. And this story introduces the idea of the pain chip and the sense that droids aren't just robots, they are actual living things. It's a fascinating take on the idea of artificial intelligence. So, a bad feeling, but a fucking good story. Tessek's tale deals with a Quarren. Now, those of you that are not familiar with who the Quarren are, it is the squid-looking dude with the kind of squid tentacles coming down from his face. If you are familiar with the Clone Wars television show, which is streaming on Disney+, you will know that the Mon Calamari, which Admiral Akbar is a Mon Calamari, and the Quarren share the planet of Mon Cala. They are often at odds with one another. The Mon Calamari obviously rule the planet, and the Quarren are kind of beneath them. A little bit like the humans and the Gungan on Naboo, where, like, while they're living in the same place, one feels above the other, and blah, blah, blah. So Tessek is a Quarren. He's really fascinated with the monks that previously inhabited Jabba's palace. Ultimately, Tessek's thing is he just wants to be left alone, I guess. He just wants some peace of mind. He wants to get back to Mon Cala. It's a good story because the character is relatable. I like the character of Tessek. He actually appears in previous stories. And ultimately, really? In the middle of this? What? You don't want me talking about a squid person because you like eating squid? Okay, so my cat clearly doesn't want me talking about the squid person. He ends up joining the monks, having his brain removed, put in a jar, which, unlike Bib Fortuna, he actually wants this. He enjoys talking with them, and through the story you find out that he has actually been communicating with one of the monks. I believe they're the Bomar monks. I might be mistaken there. And yeah, Tessek is one of the few stories that not only do you feel for this character that is just a throwaway. I had the figure of Tessek, although back in the day I don't think he had a name, but I had the Quarren figure with the little squid tentacles when Star Wars figures were a big thing. And just to kind of understand the motivations of the character, I thought was really, really cool. Really enjoyed the story, and ultimately enjoyed that the character had a satisfying outcome. Tongue-tied, Bubo's tale, it's a bit of an odd one. Bubo is Jabba's frog dog. You see him at the beginning of Return of the Jedi. His tongue comes out and grabs the thing. He's sitting outside of Jabba's palace. What you don't realize, because of that one shot, you kind of think he's just an animal, but he's actually an intelligent creature, something of an assassin, almost. He has also been communicating with the monks, and ultimately he also gets his brain transplanted into the jar so that he can continue kind of conversing with the monks. It's a really short, it's probably the shortest story in the collection. It's just so bizarre to think that that creature, that because it's only given one scene in the film, and the scene is of it devouring another creature, we immediately assume that it's a non-intelligent, like an animal. And we assume as well that it is a native of Tatooine, when in actual fact that race is not. They are an intelligent race. It's a case of keeping your hand concealed, playing things close to the chest. He clearly, this creature, Bubo, doesn't want people to know, or Bubo, however you want to pronounce it, doesn't want people to know that it is actually intelligent. It was an interesting story, and I like the fact that we got not just a look at a character, but insight into a possible new race. Now, the reason I say that is because I have a lot of the Star Wars role-playing games by West End and Wizards of the Coast, not so much the Fantasy Flight ones. And I like this idea that you can literally be anything you want to be. If you want to be the fucking frog dog that was in Jabba's palace, hey, they're an intelligent life form. You can be the fucking frog dog in Jabba's palace. That's fucking cool. I thought that was awesome. Out of the Closet, The Assassin's Tale by Jennifer Robeson. This kind of brings one story arc of the novel, the collection of short stories, brings it to complete fruition in that you find out who has been killing the people in all of these stories. Now, throughout the anthology, people have been turning up dead, and you're never quite sure who the assassin is. You think they're targeting Jabba the Hutt, you think they're targeting this person, you think they're targeting that person. The Gamorrean guard plays a part in it, the chef plays a part in it. You never quite know what is happening until you get to the Assassin's Tale and you find out who the killer is and why they have been doing it. And ultimately, it's pretty fucking stupid. I'm sorry. I enjoyed the story. Don't get me wrong. As a short story, self-contained, it works. And it works very, very well. In the grand scheme of what this book is trying to do, not so much. And that might be me. That might just be me as a reader who has built up an expectation going into this anthology, realizing, and honestly, you only realize about 4 stories in that they are all connected. So you start this thinking they are just one-off stories about characters you saw in Return of the Jedi. Not the case. So that might be a me thing, and I fully understand that, and I fully respect that for the people that put this book together. The killer, spoiler alert, skip. If you don't want to know what the killer's motivation is, or how he kills, because that is one of the big things. No one knows how these people are dying. They don't have any marks on their body. How the fuck are they dying? Shit comes out of this guy's face and he goes up their nose and he sucks out their brain like it's ancient fucking Egypt. That's pretty much it. His ultimate goal, of course, is to suck the brain out of Jabba the Hutt. Yeah. He's face things in the slug thing, up the slug thing's nose, suck the brain out of Jabba the Hutt. Whatever. I think the character has potential. I am surprised that nothing else was done with this character. I would have liked to have seen more, and that is coming from a huge fan of Star Wars, in as much as I am just recently going back and watching the Clone Wars. I am rereading all of the extended universe novels while at the same time reading the Disney Plus or the novels that Disney have made canon with the High Republic and all of that kind of stuff. The character is interesting. The motivation is fucking stupid, in my opinion. It just is dumb. And at the end of the story, when he realizes that Jabba is dead and he will never get to suck the brains out of the giant slug thing, I don't know. It was good. A bit of a weak payoff if you're reading this book to work out who is committing all these murders. I don't know. It seemed cheap to me. I can't say any more than that. It was a cheap payoff. Above like that, the tale of Boba Fett, arguably one of the most popular characters in Star Wars canon, although how Boba Fett became so popular, I honestly don't know. He first appeared in the holiday special. That was Boba Fett's literal first appearance. He was in Empire Strikes Back when Vader was getting the bounty hunters together. We got to see Boba Fett, Dengar, Bosk, IG-88, a couple of the other more famous ones. And then such an absolutely fucking stupid death in Return of the Jedi. Now, Boba Fett is an interesting character. In the prequel series, we got to see like Jango Fett wanted to raise one of the clones as his own. That's Boba. In the Clone Wars series, you get to see Boba as the leader of a group of bounty hunters, which is really cool, and I really like what they did with that character. The Book of Boba Fett, if you haven't seen it, kind of shows his escape from the Sarlacc pit and his subsequent rise. Book of Boba Fett is a phenomenal show. All the Disney Plus Star Wars shows are phenomenal. You should go ahead and watch them. The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and Kenobi. Just amazing. I really am blown away by what they're doing. There was a trilogy of books that focused on Boba Fett, that had him being found by Dengar from the Sarlacc pit, the Bounty Hunter trilogy. They are not canon, of course, but you kind of get the idea. So in this story, Boba Fett is inside the Sarlacc pit, and he's basically talking to someone, and you get a little bit of backstory about how Boba got to Tatooine with Han Solo in the Carbonite, which, by the way, just an aside, War of the Bounty Hunters, the Marvel Star Wars comic, deals with Boba Fett trying to get Han Solo to Tatooine, and a fucking amazing series. Fucking read it. I might do a full review on it a little bit later on down the line. You never know. So you get this this story about Boba Fett communicating with someone. They are trying to get you to believe that the Sarlacc pit is a sentient being. That there was a Jedi that was kind of eaten by the Sarlacc pit. And all through this story, you get this kind of aside story where the person who accompanies Boba Fett to Jabba's barge and the Sarlacc pit tells him that his sister, not Boba Fett's sister, but the character's sister, was the first person the Sarlacc pit ever released, that she was a dancer in Mos Eisley. Some Imperials wanted to do things to her. She escaped from them. They chased her. And ultimately what ended up happening is the Imperials and her got caught in the Sarlacc pit, the pit of Carcoon, I should say. And the Imperials were killed, and when the sister was dragged down by the Sarlacc actually spit her out. And the legend is the Sarlacc punishes only people who are evil, and this person was kind of not evil. And you kind of get the idea of that is how Boba Fett survives the Sarlacc. He ends up blowing his way out, which is not as cool as what happens in the Book of Boba Fett, which ultimately is what Patton Oswalt's character says in Parks and Recreation when he's doing the filibuster. But you can go and check that out for yourself. It's all good. It's a great Boba Fett story. Learning a little bit about his history and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's a shame that it is no longer canon. But that is cool because the canon Boba Fett stuff is equally as good and equally as entertaining. But this, the story in this is just as good. The final story in this collection, Skin Deep, The Fat Dancer's Tale. Yes, they fucking went there. You see her dancing in Return of the Jedi. Just an overweight woman dancing in front of Jabba the Hutt. In this book, they refer to her as the Fat Dancer. This was a great story. And there is a reason why it was a great story. It was a great story because not only is the Fat Dancer not fat, you actually find out that her race comes from a desert planet similar to Tatooine, and their body absorbs water. So they look fat, but as they kind of use that water, they get slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. But Jabba the Hutt, being the fat fuck that he is, likes her to be overly fat. So not only do you get that aspect, but this is a story of ultimately redemption. In as much as she's taken from her planet with her husband and their children. She's, by the way, the Fat Dancer is also known as the six-breasted dancer. She has 6 boobies. That's because her race, like the kids suckle on the titties, whatever. 6 boobs, who cares? I remember going to the Easter show with my father and my brother back in the day, and there was a woman called, like on the freak show, Nora, the girl with 3 knockers, And it was literally just the special effects from fucking Total Recall. Like the 2 boobs and the 1 boob. And it was a photograph. It was fucking dumb. But I always remember that. So the 6-breasted woman, whatever. I don't give a fuck how many tits she's got. I don't give a fuck how fat she is. The story itself, really, really cool. Because her ultimate goal is to get out of Jabba's palace. And because her husband has been killed. And her youngest child was killed when they raided her tribe. She was the main dancer for the tribe. And she wants to buy her other 2 kids out of slavery. Really cool premise. She is in Tessek's story, the Quarren. He finds her stealing from Jabba the Hutt. And he's like, you know what? I don't fucking care what you do. So that's referenced in this story, which I thought was really, really cool. There is a guard who helps her in this. He has a problem where the atmosphere is toxic to him and he needs these special cartridges. Jabba has been giving him these cartridges 1 per day. So he asks her, do you know where they are? And she's like, I do. If you help me, I'll help you. And they kind of help each other. They get out of Jabba's palace and they're heading to Mos Eisley. The guy that she is with is a hunter. And through the course of the book, you find out that Jabba has actually hired a lot of bounty hunters to capture a crate dragon for him. So that can fight the rancor. And so he's been hunting this crate dragon. And during the course of the story, they come across one. And he manages to kill it. Recover the pearls that are inside the dragon. If you're familiar with the video games and whatnot, this isn't news to you at all. She gets to Mos Eisley with him, uses the last of her money to get him the chemicals that he needs to survive because he saved her life. So she repays the debt. And ultimately what ends up happening is they get the kids back and buy a starship and just go off together. And it is a fantastic way to end an anthology of fucking stories about Jabba's palace, because we know Jabba the Hutt is a crime lord. We know the people that hang around him are criminals. And it's just nice to have a redemption story rounding out everything and bringing us all around full circle. Really great story, really great way to end the book. And I applaud the editor's choice for the order in which this appeared. So at the end of the book, we get an epilogue, whatever became of, where we find out what happened to the characters after each story. So we find out that the fat dancer actually performed at Han Solo and Leia's wedding. Sice Noodles and Max Rebo parted ways, but her solo career didn't kind of take off. Droopy McCool went off in the Tatooine desert to meet more of his kind. Malakili managed to rescue Porcellus from his cell where he was being kept by Jabba for poisoning him. And they went off and started a restaurant in Mos Eisley. The Gamorrean guard that's carrying around the dead people became like a bounty hunter almost. He found, a smuggler, but he still carried around the dead bodies. Ifant Mon returned to his home planet and started a religion that worshipped the Force. The Whiffid, Jaquil, tried to go to his home planet, but realized that Lady Valerian had a bounty out on him, so he ended up joining the monks and having his brain removed and put in a jar. Bib Fortuna, same thing with Nat. They remained as monks. The assassin, Danik Jericho, the guy that would snort your brains out. Basically, he was the hunter, now he's the hunted. And it says, it ends with, and of course, both Boba Fett and Mara Jade kept themselves very, very busy, but those are other stories entirely. And they are other stories entirely because Timothy Zahn continues using Mara Jade in many of his novels, and other authors did. And of course, Boba Fett has the Bounty Hunter series. All in all, Star Wars Tales from Jabba's Palace was an interesting read. I enjoyed it. I thought all the stories were very well written. There wasn't any in here that I felt dragged. I think all the authors did a fantastic job. You get a lot in this book, and I love the fact that it all ties around the beginning of Return of the Jedi in Jabba's palace. A lot of collections like this tend not to do that. But this one kind of focused on a little bit on everyone that you could see at the opening of Return of the Jedi. Hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry that it was a little bit long, but them's the breaks. Short story collections are a little bit more tedious, I should say, to review. Like, subscribe, do all the good stuff at the end, except be very quiet when you do it, because she's telling you to shush. Stay safe. I'll see you in the next video, and please, people, read a fucking book.